This is Penny, my Cagiva River 600 1996. I got her from a friend a few months back who had bought her at auction, well, a good few years ago, and she just sat in the garage ever since as a non-runner. Her last tax disc, actually, that I removed, you can see that was back from 2003, which goes to show how long she has been off the road for. So when I got her, she was covered in dust, looked really neglected. I started off by taking off the tank, removing the carburetor, had a look at that. I took the bowl off to look at the floats. I wanted to check to see if there's any kind of dirty residue in the bottom of the car, but it actually all seemed okay, which was really good. I then removed the airbox and discovered the air filter foam was absolutely disgusting. Actually, when I removed it, my finger went straight through the foam just because it was so coated in oil. That was quite difficult to find online, a replacement part, I guess because they've stopped making parts of these bikes many years ago. So I ended up removing the old foam, giving the blue frame of the air filter a really good clean, and then using contact adhesive to put on a new bit of foam that I ordered online. And that actually looked really good in the end, so I was quite pleased with the result of that. I then removed the spark plug. That didn't look great either. It had quite a lot of carbon deposits on it. So I mean, I knew I was going to replace that anyway, but it was good to kind of inspect it just to see what state it was in. I then took out the oil filter. Again, I don't think that had actually been replaced probably since the bike was maybe even made. It was the original oil filter that I took out. I had a look online again. It was really difficult to find the right one, and the ones that were on there were actually about £30 plus delivery from Germany or something like that. Which I thought was quite ridiculous. So I found another one online that someone was selling, advertised for the Cagiva River, and I thought I'd take a bit of a gamble with it because it didn't look quite right in the picture. And when it arrived, it was kind of the right size, other than the actual hole in it that slots on to where the oil filter goes was a little bit too small. So I took a file to that and just made sure I filed with the filter kind of downwards so I didn't get any of those metal splinters actually in the oil filter, made the hole a bit bigger, and then that fitted really well in the end. So I was quite glad with that result as well. I then put in a bit of new petrol, because now I've got a new air filter, oil filter, spark plug, cranked the engine a few times, put in some new fuel and just kept everything crossed that I would get her to start. And she did. It took maybe kind of 30 seconds to get the petrol through the system, but yeah, she turned over, so that was a really good result to know that the engine wasn't seized and that I wouldn't have to go into the engine in any more detail because I wouldn't really know where to start with that. So once I got her running, I then knew that there was going to be a lot more hard work to get her on the road. Both the front and rear master cylinders were seized. When I took off the front master cylinder, I cracked the lid. And to be fair, there was no kind of coming back from that anyway because it seemed to be pretty seized. I tried to free it up, and I thought it was probably best, considering it's a front brake, to get a new one or a good second-hand one. Rear master cylinder, I actually managed to free up, just pushing a screw in and out on my Feist a few times. So that was really good. Got that to work, cleaned that up, sprayed that up. All the pistons in the calipers were also seized, so that took a lot of work to push them in and out gradually, a bit at a time, using WD-40 and penetration oil, but eventually I did manage to free up the rear ones and reassembled that. I then removed the swing arm, took out the pivot linkages, found that the bearings actually in the pivot linkages were actually the same or very similar to what I have in my F650 BMW, where they actually used, or when they were originally put in, it was like roller bearings, so it's not in a cage. You have all these little individual needles basically that you have to put back in. A couple of them are just completely seized in. I didn't want to spend too much on this part of the bike, but I realised that I wasn't happy putting it back together knowing that they're in such a bad condition, so I did order a couple new bearings and put them in. I then cleaned and sprayed the swing arm back up, reassembled everything. The chain slider snapped when I took off the swing arm, so I bought a new bit of rubber, actually from Amazon, and that fitted really well. Then it was a horrible job of sanding the wheels down because they're in horrible condition, painting them back up. So I got some black spray paint. They're kind of like a dark grey, It's the original colour, but I decided to go with black. Got some new tyres put on, then I ordered new chain and sprockets in gold, just because I always think that a bit of bling always looks nice. Sanded and sprayed up the engine casing, the rear handle mount. The headlight was pretty horrible as well. They just used some gaffer tape to keep that in place. They never actually bothered replacing the screws that had, there was like bits of plastic that the screws go into and they'd actually snapped. But I found that just putting in some longer screws held it in place completely fine. So I don't know why that hadn't been done years ago, why they just used kind of sellotape to keep that in place. I then got a new second-hand master cylinder, which is actually from a BMW CS motorbike on eBay. I thought, again, it was taking a bit of a risk. I hadn't read anywhere that this would work, but I thought it looked kind of similar to the Brembo one that I'd taken off. And when it arrived, actually, it was really good. It fitted really well, and even the electrical terminal for the front brake light, it was really easy just to transfer that over. I just had to make the holes a tiny little bit bigger where it screws into, but other than that, it was really straightforward. I then had to free up the pistons in the front caliper. That was quite difficult. I ended up buying some little clamps to kind of keep the other ones in place. So I'd kind of hold free in place and then push through the brake fluid. And that actually then freed up one piston kind of at a time. So I was really lucky that I managed to keep that as well, rather than having to spend more money on new calipers. Yeah, and then I think that was really, I say it, I've kind of done everything to the bike that I could possibly do. She's still not perfect. She's got, you know, a bit of rust here and there, or quite a lot of rust here and there. There was quite a lot of pitting on the forks, so I managed to get a lot of it off just by cleaning her up. But some of it will just have to stay. I don't want to kind of go too overboard because, as you know, these bikes aren't really worth too much money anyway, so I didn't want to kind of end up spending thousands of pounds on her. I'm just chuffed really. I've got her back on the road, and you know, for a bike that's been sat in the garage for 2003, yeah, nearly 20 years, I think it's fantastic really that, you know, we've got another bike that otherwise would probably be scrapped riding around Bedfordshire. So I still need to get her through an MOT, but I can't see that she'll really fail now. There's a couple of things I need to look at: a slightly sticky throttle. I just want to double check the rear brakes. There seems to be quite a lot of play in the lever, but other than that, she's riding pretty well. So yeah, really pleased with her. Like I said, if you do have any questions, just whack them in the comments below and I'll get back to you.